La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seul.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to offer the second webinar in the Sixth National Report Technical Webinar Series. This week, we'll be talking about how you can integrate spatial data into your Sixth National Report. My name is Christina Supples, and I manage the Sixth National Report Technical Support Project for UNDP. And then today, we're going to be talking about the efforts of parties to incorporate spatial data analyses into their national biodiversity planning and reporting processes. As you may have heard, a recent UNDP study indicates that 4 to 5 maps are incorporated into each post-2010 NBSAP or national report. Not very many. Now, of the parties being supported by this project, in November, 82% indicated a high need for land and resource use and human footprint data. Additionally, 73% have a high need for socio-demographic data layers, and 50% have a high need for land cover data. To help address this gap, the Sixth National Report Project is working with UN Environment's MapX division to build a spatial data tool that you can use without any GIS training to analyze key spatial data related to biodiversity, conservation, threats, and sustainable development. This morning, we have the opportunity to work with Dr. Jamison Ervin and Scott Atkinson, who will provide you an overview with the types of spatial data support that are available to you during this project. We'll then provide a tutorial of the spatial planning tool, the MapX, and you'll have the opportunity to ask technical GIS questions. This presentation is available in English, but we offer you the opportunity to ask any of your questions in Spanish and French, and we can provide simultaneous translation of them. Each of you as an attendee is automatically muted, but there are 2 ways to communicate with us throughout the presentation. The first is that you can raise your hand, and then when we get to the question and answer period, I will call on you, lower your hand, unmute you, and you can ask the question. The second thing you can do is you can type your questions into the chat box. Again, you can type them in English, French, or Spanish, and we'll be able to read them out in language and get you the answer that you need in your native language. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Jamison Ervin and turn it over her to talk about how UNDP and UNEP are working together with spatial data for better decision making. Over to you, Dr. Ervin.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome to this webinar on the partnership between UNDP and UN Environment on spatial data. A little bit of background. UNDP and UN Environment have been supporting 140 plus countries on NBSAPs, most recently over the past 4 years, but we've been supporting these countries, you, for the past quarter century. We're now in this phase providing support to 140 countries on the 6th National Report. Just a reminder for those of you who might be new to this process, Article 26 of the Convention names national reports as the objective is to provide information on the measures taken on the implementation of the Convention and the effectiveness of these measures. This cycle is particularly important as we look to the run-up to 2020 and beyond. The Global Biodiversity Outlook 5 will be critical for shaping the post-2020 strategic plan for biodiversity. The 6 national reports will build the evidence base for this Global Biodiversity Outlook. Collaboration between the Convention on Biological Diversity, Secretariat, UNDP, and UN Environment will help us have a consistent approach to the national reports and have a more robust, clear outlook for the next phase. The 6 national reports will also establish a clear baseline for the Aichi biodiversity targets in every country, something that we haven't had to date. A little bit more on the background. In 2014, Zimbabwe's first iteration of their NBSAP, or National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, didn't include much, if any, spatial data. In discussing with the government of Zimbabwe why this was, they asked our team if we could help in accessing global data sets, and they challenged us to provide support. And our team took up the challenge. And And we created with UN Pulse Lab in Kampala a tool that we launched in Nyanga in Zimbabwe that allowed the government to access a number of data layers without needing GIS. This is just a look at the beta tool, which is still available online, and we'll be sending you this presentation, so you can click on the link. It had a number of data layers, including biodiversity significance. We had 5 layers, areas such as key biodiversity areas or important bird areas. It had the protected area footprint. We had 4 different layers. It included threats to biodiversity. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, those are mineral deposits and mining concessions, for example. It included information related to resilience and also information related to mainstreaming. We brought high-resolution photos and imagery from these different maps to Zimbabwe, and at the Spatial Data Workshop, that's where participants started making the connections between the fires they were seeing around Harare and the wetland conversions and the water security issues they were facing. They saw this in a very spatial way. And as a result of this workshop, they incorporated an integrated watershed management plan into their NBSAP. Our team knew that NBSAPs were relatively weak on spatial data, as Chrissy mentioned in the introduction, but we hadn't systematically analyzed to what extent were countries using spatial data in their national reports and in their NBSAPs. So we analyzed every single map from every single post-2010 NBSAP and 5th national report to get an idea of what actually were countries using, what might they need some additional assistance with. We created a taxonomy for analyzing these maps, and we tagged every map with this taxonomy, and we wrote up the study last year. Some of the key findings: the average number of maps per NBSAP per country was fewer than 4, and one of those maps was the map of the country itself. So really we're talking about a very few number of maps. And the 5th national report was not much better. The average number of maps was fewer than 5. 32 NBSAPs and 25th national reports had no maps at all, and roughly 3/4 of the NBSAPs and 90 of the 5th national reports had 4 or fewer maps. 87 countries had a combined average of 7 maps or fewer between both reports, and 73 countries have a combined average of 4 maps or fewer between both reports. So you get a flavor that really these reports don't have much spatial data. This is just another view. You can see that the cluster really was around 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. A small group of countries had 5 to 7, and just a few countries had more than 12. There are a few other take-home messages that we took from this study. The first is that 1/3 of all the national reports and 1/5 of all NBSAPs had either no maps at all or only non-actionable maps. When we say actionable, these are maps that allow decision makers to take the next step. So for example, a map of protected areas in itself doesn't really tell a decision maker what kind of action they should take. It's just a status map. But a map that overlays protected areas with key biodiversity areas then gives a sense of what's protected and what's not, so it's considered actionable. 80% of the national reports and 70% of NBSAPs had no actionable maps whatsoever. Only 3% focused on the future and looked at future scenarios, only 3% of the maps. And only 1% of the maps, tiny proportion, included socioeconomic data, such as poverty. Fewer than 4% of all the maps focused on ecosystem services. When we think about the Aichi biodiversity targets, there are 10 key questions that emerge. And I'll just walk through them. The first is, where can we manage biodiversity to reduce poverty? And you can see This is a crosswalk between the Aichi biodiversity target and the Sustainable Development Goals. The second is, where have we surpassed safe ecological limits, especially around fisheries and forestry and agriculture, for example. The third is, where are the opportunities to cut habitat loss in half? Where should sustainable agriculture, forestry, and aquaculture be placed? Where is pollution having the most harm? Where do we need efforts on invasive alien species? Where are the most vulnerable and intact reefs and ecosystems? Where should new protected areas go and other effective conservation measures? Where must we protect and restore to avoid extinction? And where must we restore to maintain essential ecosystem services? All of these questions have a spatial component to them. We found in our analysis that the current data within NBSAPs and Fifth National Reports really don't allow for planning, implementation, or reporting on those 10 key questions. And the missing data that we need, for example, information on population, poverty, land rights, natural resource productivity, land cover change, invasive alien species, climate vulnerability, human footprint, the future footprint, sustainable land management, pollution, and essential ecosystem services. Really, a more fundamental question is that NBSAPs, because they are missing these data as well as national reports, we really can't answer the basic questions related to SDGs on how biodiversity can alleviate poverty, supply water, help us grow food, create jobs and livelihoods, protect communities from disaster, sequester carbon, and ensure health. And I show this graphic, the SDGs and their targets. The darker the green, the more indivisible nature is to achieving that sustainable development goal and target. And the lighter green means that it contributes to it. And you can see that many of the ones that are green, for example, food and health and economic development, poverty, are closely related to nature and depend on nature. So about the same time, our team had submitted a proposal to NASA, the space agency in the US, with several partners. And our partners got the money, but we got their labor and the satellite data on forests, and the NASA partnership was born. We have a number of partners, including Montana State University, University of Northern British Columbia, Northern Arizona University, University of Queensland, Maryland, the Wildlife Conservation Society, NASA, the Pulse Lab, and UNDP. These are some of the deliverables of the project. The first is that we will update the human footprint to 2013 globally at 1,000 meters. This is a very in-depth look at how much land has been converted and what the overall human footprint is. This gives an aggregate view of many different threats. The second is projecting wilderness decline by 2030. You can see in these smaller maps, it will show where the likelihood of wilderness losses is to occur. The third is that we will map forest condition and forest cover loss globally. We'll be looking at rates and drivers of loss. And so there'll be an understanding of what is actually driving the loss of intact forest landscapes, whether it's fire, logging, agriculture and pasture, energy, transportation, or other drivers. And we'll also map forest fragmentation and forest connectivity. These are some early looks at some of the products. We have a partnership with 8 pilot countries, and these are countries that will be taking an in-depth look at the data, testing of the tools, and integrating the spatial data into their national planning fairly soon. And these are Brazil, Colombia, DR Congo, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Indonesia, Peru, and Vietnam. So let's talk about spatial data in the context of the 6th National Report. It's part of our support to parties. UNDP and UN Environment will provide support to spatial data to all countries. And we hope that this will lead to more use of spatial data, not only within the 6 national reports, but to make the spatial data available to all countries in order that they can use them to make better decisions. With partners, we're creating a kind of sandbox data environment. And this means that you can bring your toys and you can come and play and share them with others. We are providing a minimum data set to answer the essential Aichi biodiversity targets and the Sustainable Development Goal questions. The tool will allow countries to upload their own national data sets and to have these data sets interact with other global data sets and then to pull their own reports. It also allows queries that would answer key status and trend questions such as, what is the status of the protection of key biodiversity areas or the restoration of essential areas important for essential ecosystem services? And the system allows users to draw shapefiles to capture local knowledge. We're building this data set with 4 categories of data. The first is biodiversity data, including ecosystems, key biodiversity areas, forest cover change, forest health, connectivity, and other layers. The second is the conservation data. This includes protected areas, locally managed marine areas, indigenous areas, and other effective conservation measures where we have the data, working, of course, with the World Conservation Monitoring Center. The third category is threat data, and this includes the human footprint as individual and aggregate layers, but it also includes other layers where we have them, such as mining concessions and other layers. And finally is we're calling the SDG layer. These are the layers of data that will answer questions about water sources, land tenure, poverty, carbon stocks, disaster risk reduction, and more. Our team conducted a needs assessment, an in-depth assessment on spatial planning from 45 countries. We found that although 90% have national spatial data labs, the report that they give back is that the data are often siloed and inaccessible to them, especially in different departments. As Chrissy mentioned, 82% reported that they have a very high need for land use, resource use, and human footprint data layers. Roughly 3/4 have a high need for basic socio-demographic data layers, and half have a high need for land cover by geographic data layers. We are working with UN Environment's MapX division to build this tool, this data sandbox. And the benefit is that MapX is an ongoing, fully functional platform of an implementation partner. So the costs are quite low, and we will have this tool ready in time for parties to use it in their 6th national report this year. We expect to complete phase 1 in May and to roll out, I should say maybe late May, early June, and to roll out support to countries following that. I just wanted to show you this one single map of the many, many different maps that can be created. This just shows 3 layers. The first is this area highlighted in yellow is the watershed source for Dar es Salaam, a city that is facing acute water shortages. The pink and green shows forest cover and forest loss, not much forest gain to show here, but you can see that a little bit, roughly 10% of the area of the watershed of Dar es Salaam was lost in the past 16 years. And then areas in blue show the World Database on Protected Areas, shows the protected area cover. From this single map, which we can replicate for any city worldwide that we have data for, you can immediately see that there's room for action, whether it's forest restoration or including new protected areas or other measures that will help secure water for the city of Dar es Salaam. And this gives decision makers a sense not only of how much needs to be protected or restored, but also where do these areas occur. And you can see a large area of forest loss in the central protected area. This raises questions about why is this loss occurring and would lead to action. Countries can use the maps generated in MapX as evidence for reporting progress on measures as part of the 6 national reporting process. And they can also use the data to report on numerous CBD indicators. So the idea is that this system will come pre-populated with a number of maps that you can simply click on, or you can play with the data and create new maps. And the good thing is you don't need GIS training. Anyone could use this system. And you can upload these maps and create a direct link to the progress measures in the 6 national report. With that, I'm going to, Chrissy, do you want a pause, or would you like to go right to the MapX demo?
Hi everyone, thanks Jamie. I'd like to take a pause and ask questions. So with that, encourage folks, this is the time to reflect on what Jamie has said and let us know if you have any questions, and please don't be shy. There's 2 options, as I mentioned earlier. The first is that you can raise your hand, and the second is that you can type your question to the chat box in Spanish, French, or English. So we have our first question from James. James, I'm going to lower your hand and take you off mute. Hi, James. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much, Chrissy. Good afternoon. It is afternoon in the UK here to Jamison. A slight question, if I may, please, linking back with the first seminar on how we put information into the 6 national report templates. And I asked a question there about being able to put images in particular with respect to indicators. But I think the same issue applies with respect to maps as well, in that what seems to be possible with the tool at the moment is that we can link to such things, but by linking we're only saying it's here somewhere, rather than being able to show a map and to be able to then interpret that map, or to be able to make some commentary upon a map. And I do think there is therefore an issue to be resolved perhaps about how we are able to use images, be they of charts or be they of maps, within the 6 national report process. Thank you.
That's an excellent. Oh, go ahead, Chrissy.
It's okay. I was just going to agree, and it sounds like Jamie is as well. I don't see Lige on the call today, but I will definitely provide that feedback to him. I think one of the things that they envision that you can do is that you can upload the map as an attachment. So you could label it figure X, and then you could write dialogue about that in the online reporting tool and reference it. But I'm not sure how that then gets printed out into a package. So it's a conversation that we can definitely continue to have with the CBD to make sure that the online reporting tool can fully integrate this data.
I think there are 2 things. One is submitting essential data to CBD as part of an obligation for reporting, but it's very different than to have a national report for the country itself. And the national report for the country itself can very much be a narrative report integrated with images, integrated with any other data set. And that's what is really for the purpose of improved planning, improved execution. Submitting the data through the online portal and the Excel spreadsheet that our teams have created is simply a matter of transmitting some essential data layers.
Yeah, and Jamie, I just want to clarify that the online reporting tool is designed to actually create the full report. So that's the impression that we were given last week during our training call. So the hope is that everything would be complementary together. Okay, thank you, James, for your question. Other questions for Jamie? It's a great opportunity to answer your spatial planning questions, thinking about how you integrate it into 6th and R. Remember that you can raise your hand and also type in the chat. Okay, so we have a question from Carlos, and Carlos, I'm going to take you off mute. Hi, Carlos. Carlos's question is, Jamie and Scott, would it be possible to upload national data into the tool? For example, the Brazilian Official Protected Areas database.
Sorry, Chrissy, I didn't quite catch the question.
Yeah, so the question, Carlos went back on mute. I think there's a connection issue. So will it be possible to upload national data into the MapX tool? For example, the Brazilian Official Protected Areas database.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why we found a need to have not only the ability to upload, but to download and also to play. So if a country has its own protected area system where they have finer scale resolution, or they have data that the global data sets don't have, absolutely they can upload their own data and use it and show that data instead of the global data set. The idea is to build a tool that's of use to countries to help integrate different sources of data in a common platform without the use of GIS.
Great, thank you. And Carlos, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to type them in the box or raise your hand. Other questions for Jamie right now? Okay, so with that, I'll just tell everyone that we do have another opportunity to ask questions after Scott's demo. And if you have questions during the demo, feel free to type them into the box or raise your hand, and I'll make sure that we take them as we go. And then at the very end, you'll have a chance to interact with Jamie and Scott again. Thank you, Jamie, for that very informative presentation. That did an excellent job of setting the stage of how we can use data during our 6 national reports.
Okay.
So with that, we'll turn it over to Scott Atkinson with the University of Queensland, who is building the MapX tool. He's going to be doing a live demonstration with you of the tool. And Scott, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Chrissy. I hope everybody can hear me. If you can't, let us know. If you should be seeing my screen right now, I'm currently opened up to the MapX test platform. This is their current beta test version that I'm just going to be running you through a little bit, going through some of the basic functionality. And I remind you that this is their test platform, so if something decides to crash or not work, don't be too surprised for the moment. We hope that doesn't happen. Anyways, here we are. We're starting looking at Australia. That happens to be where I am. I'm in this little place over here on the right-hand side called Brisbane. So just like any kind of map tool that you might have ever played with online, you can scroll around, you can go in and out. And you'll probably notice as well on the left-hand side, similar to say Google Maps or Google Earth, you have a list of assets that you can look at, a list of layers. So for example, if we want to turn on the urban asset layer, it'll respond quickly. We can see this is the identified urban boundaries of some of the cities around Brisbane. We turn that off. We can turn on national parks, for example. You can see some of the national parks around Brisbane. We can turn that off again. And you'll see that we're limited to a different number of layers here. So every country currently has a set of data that's specific and unique to it. Some of them have more right now, and some of them have less than others. But Australia itself really isn't very interesting because we're not focusing this tool on Australia's needs at the moment. So we're going to go around and we're going to go visit somewhere else. So we come up here, we can go into the left on this little box here where it says Australia. We click on there. We can go to any country we like. We're going to go to India, because India sounds like a fun place to go. And just like Google Earth is something, we fly around and we just instantly go there automatically. Now we'll move that kind of out of the way.
Scott, I'm just going to interject and say we have some feedback. If you could speak closer to the mic, that would be helpful.
Sure, I'll try to.
Perfect. Yeah, better already. Thank you.
Okay, good. So you might as well notice as well, up where we shows our country, India, you see where it says English. So one of the things that we're very aware of is that lots of software around the world is uniquely in English, or possibly Spanish, or some of the large languages spoken around the world. We really want to try and get this tool to be usable to as many people as possible and as many languages as possible. So we're going to be incorporating not just English and Spanish and French. We're trying to incorporate as many languages as we possibly can. So presently we have French. If we change that, we see the interface changes. If we put it into Mandarin, we see some changes. Now you'll notice not everything changes instantly at the same time. Now this is partly because the translations aren't done at present, but we rest assured that these are things that are in works. Anybody speaks Persian? There you go. Now, being a typical English speaker, I only speak English, so I'm going to go back to English. And there we go back again. So I remind you again that while we can't obviously translate everything for every language in the world, we are making a large effort to try and get at least 8 to 12 large global languages, particularly for the countries and the partners we're working with. So going back to the question that Carlos mentioned a second ago, he inquired about uploading their own data into MapX. So one of the key features in MapX is the ability to secure your own data under your own passwords and kind of control who has access to it and who doesn't. And along with that is the ability to store data that you want to use for yourself or you can share with others. So the simple process of uploading data can happen in one of two ways. One of which is a simple drop and drag, where you can take the data from a file and drop it and drag it into the map interface. Or you can go a second way that gives you a little bit more power to control some of the attributes in the data, which is what we're going to do right now. Like I said, sometimes the beta tool doesn't work as well as it's supposed to. All right, we'll go the simple way, since that's not giving me the option to do it right now. So we can go in here. Here I have a GeoJSON file, which is a type of geospatial data for those that aren't familiar. And this is coming from the IUCN range map data for Panthera tigris, which is just a tiger. So I've extracted that, a single species layer, and we can take it and we can drop and drag it into MapX. And in 91 milliseconds, it loads it and projects it. So with that, you can go in and you can click on this data. You can see some of the attributes for it. Here we just see some of the name, Panthera tigris, where the data comes from, just some other information that's always part of the attributes of any spatial data that you have. Close that down. So the way that I wanted to show you to do it before that wasn't working in the recent manifestation of it this afternoon, it was working this morning, is you go in and you use another dialog to upload data that allows you to input your own names to files. You can identify the source of it. You can put a contact person. And also of vital importance is you have a listing of data integrity features that are important for not only sharing data, but for also making sure that the data is useful for your own needs. And these are things relating to the metadata and the processing of the data, as well as its ability to talk well to other GIS systems. So these are things that aren't requirements to input data into MapX, but the things that we're really trying to encourage as we're trying to encourage better data handling and better data sharing between people. One other thing that's important to note, and Carlos may be interested in as well, as most countries, or a lot of countries do maintain spatial data in their own unique national projection systems. MapX, as in most web mapping platforms, only operate currently in a latitude-longitude projection system. So that shapefile, or that GeoJSON rather, that I uploaded here a second ago was already projected into an SRS, an EPSG code of 4326, which is the code. It's nerdy GIS code for the projection for latitude longitude. We're currently trying to work in the process of making it so countries can automatically reproject data on the fly when they import it into MapX, but that's very much in the works. So at the moment, for countries to upload data, it needs to be in a latitude-longitude coordinate system and not in your national grid system. We might be interested in, for example, once we've already loaded this tiger data, we can go on and we can see other layers that are available within India. Say we have national parks. Or we might be interested in protected areas that are broken down by the IUCN categories. We'll go turn off national parks because it gets cluttered. And if we want, we can put in cloudless satellite imagery as well to get a better view of things. So one of the key things you might be interested in all of this is knowing where protected areas and threatened species ranges overlap, for example. So here we turn on the protected areas again, overlaying with the tiger range layer. You can see there are some places, particularly up here on the right, where we do have a large overlap of protected area with tiger habitat. A lot of other places, not so much. So one of the key tools that MapX is currently in the process of making is allowing to do on-the-fly overlaying. And for people familiar with GIS, this is often called an intersection. And all it will simply allow you to do is to be able to calculate the exact area of a particular species range that is in a protected area, and then conversely, how much of that species range is unprotected. And these are things that are going to be important for answering your national reporting requirements. So now we're going to go on to the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. We're going to fly away over there to Central Africa again, just to show you something called a dashboard. So here, if we open up this Minimata Field Studies in Eastern DRC dashboard, we get a little tool that pops up that has a bunch of little windows. This one right here isn't actually showing any real data at the moment. But what these do is they can show real-time analysis of any feature you actually would like to monitor. For example, if you want to know how much of a particular habitat or in real time what your targets are hitting. So if you're trying to get at, say, a 17% protection target for a species or an ecosystem, you could have these set up so they can show you in real time as you go through time and as you increase your protected area network, reaching those targets. And going back to another image that I believe Jamie showed you before, you can also look at temporal components in some of the spatial data. If we go to this ARM conflicts, which was the one that Jamie was looking at before, we'll turn Minimata off because it clutters the screen. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the number of conflicts, but also the number of fatalities within those conflicts. And here we're looking at the entire data range itself. So because there's a temporal component to this, we can break down any particular period over the time from November 2015 to, what is that, September 2016. So over that roughly 1 year period, we can break it down to, say, a 1 month window, if you will. We can see what's happened at that particular period in time. And we can also move this window to see what's happened in each particular month period over that time. Of course, then we can also overlay this with other data, say mining revenue, or again, protected areas. We might be interested in, say, for example, poverty rate by province. So while MapX currently does have a lot of data, we are in the process of incorporating a lot more that's specific to the national reporting, the 6th National Reporting Project. So one other thing I'd like to point out just about the interface here itself is you're able to filter views. For example, if you want to know about protected areas, you can just begin typing protected, and it comes up with everything that meets that search criterion. If we want to come down in the bottom section here, we have another way we can look for data. We can look at classes of data. And these are things that you, when you import data, your own data, you can add tags onto them to help keep track of them. For example, if you're importing protected area data, you might want to tag that as protected area or environment. If you're importing data that has to do with extractives, you could put a tag called extractives, just to help you manage your data and make sense of it a little bit better. When you look at types, these are more of a technical thing, looking at vector tiles or raster tiles. As well, we can look at collections. So for example, the Minamata convention has two data layers in DR Congo that are related to it. And essentially, you can make these up to anything that's going to help you organize your thoughts and organize your reporting process. So that's all I was going to show you today on the MapX platform. Like I said, it's currently a work in process. I'm pretty happy it hasn't acted up too much today. I had it crash on me once this morning when I fed it too large of a file. But anyways, that's good. So then I was going to quickly go over and just further build on some of what Jamie mentioned about some of the data layers that we're incorporating into MapX. Some of those in particular relating to protected areas and biodiversity. These are things like the WDPA World Database on Protected Areas, key biodiversity areas, important bird areas. We're going to be tying into the IUCN species range data, and that's going to be real-time fed off of their servers, so that's going to be as up-to-date as possible. We're also going to be including indigenous and community conserved areas. We're going to be using the updated global ecoregions data, Ramsar data, Alliance for Zero Extinction sites, and we're also going to be trying to find a way to make the ecological land units available to people. This is, for those who know, this is probably the highest resolution ecosystem data that's available on the planet at a global scale. Now, for countries that do have better habitat or ecosystem data at their national level, then we really do encourage you to use that. But at the same time, this is a product from the United States Geological Survey that's at about a 250-meter global resolution. It takes into account soil characteristics, climate characteristics, land cover characteristics to create a series of these ecological land units. And like I say, it may not be exactly the same thing as an ecosystem, but it's the closest best thing that currently exists on the planet. We're also going to be incorporating a lot of indices, for example, biodiversity habitat indices, representativeness, say that 3 times, as well as coverage statistics for PA effectiveness and so forth. Some of these indices themselves are not necessarily spatially representable on a map, but there's still things that are coming in from other data partners that are going to be useful in the reporting process, and there might be things that fit in nicely to, say, one of those tools that I showed you before, those little dashboards that can show you graphs and numbers and things in real time. We're also going to be including the global forest cover data. That's, for those who are aware, that's the Hansen forest cover data coming from NASA over the period of 2020-2016. That's a double typo there. Don't read that last part. We're also going to be including some of the best updates on mangrove cover globally, and that's going to be through 2015. That's a global mangrove data set built off of the same data set that the Hansen people are using. We're offering tools like NDVI indices, including data from some of the forest and landscape restoration data sets. We're going to be using some forest health data sets as well, including forest heights and time since disturbance. Some of the wetlands things will be including global wetlands, global surface water, and including as much recharge and water provisioning data as we can. Jamie showed a map before for Dar es Salaam. We do have pretty good data for many places in the world. It's not exclusive, it's not exhaustive. But for where we do have that data, we are going to be including it. And of course, at the national level, we do encourage countries to use their own data where they have it. We're going to be including things like global distribution of warm water coral reefs. These are all coming from WCMC. We'll be including things like the human marine footprint, marine risk maps, marine pollution maps. These are accounting for things like nutrient runoff plumes into ocean areas. We're working with partners to incorporate tidal flats data. This is a big issue, particularly in the east coast of Australia and the East Asian flyway for migratory birds and coastal development. And we'll also be incorporating global fishing watch data, probably. This is a data set that just became public within the last month or so, which is essentially real-time measurements of fishing pressures and fishing locations around the planet. We'll be making available some of the best above-ground biomass data and carbon data that's available, as well as climate change velocity data, both in the marine and terrestrial realms. And getting into the human impact on land, things that Jamie had mentioned, of course, the updates to the human footprint, updated gridded population of the world data. We have livestock data, we have infant mortality data, as well as other socioeconomic data. We have agricultural suitability and opportunity cost data, energy and communication infrastructure, as well as forecasts of urban expansion going forward. So these lists I've just shown you here it's not an exhaustive list. These are all things that are in the works, and we're trying to incorporate as much as we can that we think is reasonable. But we're trying to make sure that we can get these essential data layers into the tool first thing so that users have access to them. And that is everything I have for the moment. If anybody has any questions, please send them across or ask them across.
Great. Thank you, Scott, for that very interesting demonstration. I understand that there were some sound issues during your presentation. I just wanted to recognize that and apologize to the crowd. There wasn't much that we could do to fix that. I hope everyone was able to watch along. One thing that Jamie and I realized we should do is just have a recording of a demonstration for everyone. So that's something we'll work on so that we'll circulate it. You can watch a quick video about how you could use MapX. I think that would be really helpful. With that, I wanted to
I apologize for that. The internet in Australia is not very good sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely an internet connectivity issue. So we have a question from James. I'm going to take off mute James. Hi, James.
Hi there. Thank you very much indeed again. Thank you, Scott. That was an interesting presentation. A question for you, but also a question for Jamison, if I may, please, which I think leads from this. The first question for you, Scott, is about links with the masses of new Earth observation data that are becoming available and how you see being able to incorporate that sort of stuff within MapX. I could see that being potentially very useful. Just as an example, colleagues of mine at the Joint Nature Conservation Committee and through the DEFRA Earth Observation work are working very hard to do pre-processing of Copernicus data in order that that can then be used for a variety of projects without having to go back to the raw spectral data. So there's some interest there in terms of how that might be possible to do something similar on a global level. And then a question for Jamison, linking back with the sorts of different spatial layers that were being described there, and perhaps how that links with some of the work that's being discussed through GeoBon and the Essential Biodiversity Variables project, and the extent to which some of those variables may be able to come available through this sort of work, because I've seen that as being one of the difficulties of that whole area. So sorry if those are two slightly complicated questions, but definitely an area of interest. Thank you.
Thank you for that, James. Yes, you touched on a very important point. This sandbox is meant to be very much a living, breathing place to come and play, and part of that means to incorporate incorporate, like you said, there's a vast amount of new data will be coming online very soon, particularly coming out of the Copernicus programs. There's a lot of value-added product that is coming out of those, and those are things that once we work out any kind of legal agreements with groups creating those data sets, there will be things that we will certainly wanting to incorporate into MapX. One of the key points of all this platform is to create one place for people to come to get the data that they need and can use, instead of having to go to various distributors and other places. So that's a very important point, and something that we will certainly be working on to build as these things become available.
And if I can chime in, thanks for the question, James. We are in early discussions with the GeoBond and their Bond in a Box project. We see that they would provide additional data layers that could be of use for this system. So we are in contact, and would be grateful for any additional thoughts you might have on data layers that are missing.
Thank you both. That's really helpful. I mean, just to quickly come back to Scott, if I may, I think that it would be really helpful to think quite carefully about what's being done elsewhere and the links that can be made, and certainly very happy to chat further if you want to discuss further the work that's being done from a UK perspective. For Jamison, just a quick thought that one of the things that I found difficult about the GeoBond stuff is just knowing what is realistically going to be available. So some clarity on that, and perhaps how some of those metrics are being calculated so that they are less black box would, I think, be particularly helpful.
Great suggestion. Thank you very much.
And I will ask Chrissy or somebody to make sure we get in touch. I would absolutely love the chance to have a chat with you further on all that, James. Possibly not at midnight, but
one issue of time zones. But yes, I'm sure we can sort something out.
Certainly. Do we have any other hands going up there? I'm unable to see on my end.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to say thank you, James. If you reply to the e-blast you got about this session, then I can connect you with Scott. I just wanted to remind everyone that you can speak in language. So we have French and Spanish translation available. So if you're more comfortable asking your question in Spanish or French, please do raise your hand or type it in the box in your native language, and we will get it answered. We have another question from Carlos. He says, congratulations on the tool. My project is again related, my question is related to the national data upload. Is the project or CBD including any efforts to work with national technical focal points to identify and upload official national data sets? Or should these uploads be done by the countries themselves? It's a really good question. I can start with this question, and then Jamie and Scott, you could add on. I think that makes a lot of sense. What we're looking from here, we're trying to figure out how to roll out the pilot tool. We're looking for countries who are interested in using it in their 6th national report over the summer, and that sounds like an excellent idea to work with the national technical focal points as they're using the tool, figure out which data sets they should upload and how they should work together. Scott, I don't know technically how that works, so over to you to talk about if that's something we can do.
Yeah, that is something that we have spoken about before, Jamie and I and others. That is very much one of the services we are looking at being able to offer. We're also looking at how much that might stretch us in terms of assisting many countries around the world doing lots of data, but at the same time, this is a vital component of this whole process is the training and the teaching of how the tool works. So that's something that we will definitely be wanting to discuss with partner countries. And I see no reason why Brazil shouldn't be at the top of that list.
Great, Carlos, I hope that answers your question. I'm going to take you off mute just to confirm. Hi, Carlos. Hi. Okay, I think he's having some audio issues. So then the next question is from Manzal. Do all countries have such data with the same details, and what are the data references?
I can answer that one a little bit. The data that we're providing, we're trying to collect data that is globally consistent and as high as quality as there is at a global level. Along with that, it has to be said that some places will have better data at the national level or at the subnational level than is available globally. And that is where we really encourage nations or countries to use that data where they have it. It will be better than what we can provide at the global level. One example of that is the global human footprint. While 1 kilometer is globally is exceptionally good at a global scale, there are places in the world where you can create a human footprint at a finer resolution. If that answers the first part of your question.
Yes, Manal, I've taken you off mute so you can talk. Manal, does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Does it answer the second part of your question as well? That was about the references?
Yes. What's the references?
So the references are a different thing. We have had a lot of discussions with country representatives, and many countries do maintain their own legal structure around what is a reference data. So that's something that is a little bit harder for me to answer. Where the data we're going to be providing comes from is its reference is, I guess, in its scientific peer review process. So all the data we're providing is what's considered global best practice or globally best data, which means that it has gone through scientific peer review and it's accepted as the best that's out there. And those ideas may or may not differ from national government ideas of what reference is. Maybe Chrissy or Jamie could touch on that issue a little bit more.
Yeah, what I can say from the early conversations I've had about this is the best way that we can support you is to enter into a conversation with your government to have them accept these data. And I think that's a one-on-one conversation with each government. We're available to do presentations like this one with your officials. We're available to provide metadata, scientific papers to verify the data that we're offering. Whatever each country needs, we can handle on a case-by-case basis with you. But I think that the data references and the nationally recognized data in each country varies so much that it really does have to be a tailored process. And again, I just want you to know that we're here to support you and open up a conversation to make that happen as, you know, is the best path forward for your country.
Okay.
Chrissy, are you still on mute? There's one other question. We have a question from Vijay who says, do we need to hire another consultant apart from the 2 for the 6NR to upload the data? That's a good question, Vijay. I think that it depends on each country's national capacity. There is room in the budget for every country, whether supported by UNDP or UN Environment. And if they want to use a portion of that to help upload data, we can certainly work with you as a team to help get that done. in theory, you should be able to import data fairly easily. Chrissy, back over to you.
Yeah, can everyone hear me? I'm not on mute.
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. That was weird. Thank you, Jamie. So, and there is one of the consultants for your project is recommended to be a spatial planning consultant, and so they could work to upload data with this project if they would like. So the next question is from Nejong. I understand the MapX tool is currently work in progress, but is there going to be a training on the use of this tool once its development is complete? Absolutely, there will be. We're hoping to release the prototype later this summer, or spring, I should say, spring in the US, so end of May. And at that time, we'll host another training, walk you through how to do it. We'll also release a series of videos. Again, we're looking for countries that are interested in piloting the beta tool. So if this sounds like something that would be helpful into your country, you all have my email. Please follow up with me and we can start that process. Okay, other questions. Carlos, the list of questions proposed by Jamie in this presentation is really important to help build innovative analyses, integrating different data sources. I think it would be very useful to go deeper in this approach, working together with countries around selected issues. It would be kind of a desk service to support countries. Is this kind of interaction possible? Yes, this kind of interaction is absolutely possible. While we're all working furiously to get our national reports in by the end of this year, this is a 2-year project. And so our 6th national report, the technical support we're providing at the global level, is going to go on for another year. So if there are working groups that we could pull together to really address certain issues, and we'd like to support that. We just need to hear from you what those issues are and what are the best ways to convene you. The project is, as you've all observed, is really reliant on global technology. So we have this webinar service, but we can have very interactive conversations through it in small working groups. And we can make that available to everyone. We also have a newly launched NBSAP forum that we'll be sharing more information on by the end of next week that allows for us to really work together to address topics through a TripAdvisor-like function where you can come and build a community around a certain issue and really dialogue with partners, sharing maps, sharing images, and dialogue on a regular basis to really address what you need. And then we can also hold Skype calls and email support. We also have the opportunity to come together at the Substa this summer.
And Chrissy, could I chime in with that as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Carlos. This is front and center of our minds. The 6th National Report is a time-bound project with the 6 national reports due at the end of this year, but we at UNDP see a broader runway of at least 3 years and into the post-2020 era where we want to begin to be able to answer these questions, or at least be able to ask them in a way that allows countries to take action. So this is a first step that we see that will help all countries have at least a minimum baseline of essential layers required to ask some of these fundamental questions. We'd be very grateful for your support in understanding how these could be used within your country and to begin to build out case studies and examples, building up toward a global data set that can help us look at the post-2020 agenda.
Great. And Carlos, I think that you're in Brazil, but we do have a group of forest countries working to adopt the spatial data early and integrate it into their national reports, and they are meeting regularly. So if I have your country right, I want to make sure that you're synced in with that. And if I don't have your country right, let's talk further about involving you in that group. So for any others, again, these webinars are complicated because you're on mute, because we're broadcasting across the world and we're trying to get a lot of information out, but really want to have a dialogue with you about the types of technical support you need, and also the best way to foster dialogue with your peers around the world remotely, because you're all working to address the same issues. So please just consider this the start of the conversation. Follow up by email, flood my inbox, and we'll start connecting you all together and figuring out how we can really move forward on doing spatial data and really working together to address some of these key conservation issues by ecosystem. Okay, so other questions. It looks like we don't actually have any other questions right now. I just wanted to encourage one last time, again, we have Spanish and French available if you're more comfortable speaking in those languages. And while we're waiting to see if we have any final questions, Jamie or Scott, do you have some closing remarks or observations that you'd like to share?
Yes, sure. From my side, to say that we stand ready to support every country together with UN Environment and under the umbrella of CBD to support every country to have full access to data, both spatial data layers at the global level, as well as to help you access national data sets within other divisions that might be of use. And we feel that this is a long overdue step, and we're excited about the prospects of this project to be able to answer questions that up until now we haven't really been able to ask. So I'm thrilled to be part of this team to support Chrissy and to see this move forward.
Great, thank you, Jamie. And we actually have a question from Vijay. Hi, Vijay, you're off mute. What is your question? It sounds like my house right now, but I see that you've also typed the question in. So the question is, you're finalizing the TORs for the consultants, and how do I get input on that? So you can send that to me and the team, Marion and Petra and I, and we'll work together to get you feedback on spatial planning. I know that many of you are in the process of finalizing your TORs, so I'm glad that you were able to attend today, get some bigger picture, and we're here to help you with that. And then as we move forward in May or early June, we'll do a next webinar where we'll actually train everyone in the beta tool. Okay, we have a question from Mateus. His question is, I'm going to unmute him. Thank you for the presentation and developing the tool. Where should we address if we have further questions while we're working to upload spatial data? Is the tool going to be available on the web desk or something similar? Is there also going to be a help desk? And Mateus, you're off of mute. So the person who's going to be leading the tool development and rollout is Scott Atkinson, who gave the presentation today. So we'll be working with him and the team when you have questions about how to use the tool. Scott, is there anything you'd like to elaborate on?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I will be kind of your point person if you do have questions about using the tool. As the tool is still in development, this is something that I will be learning possibly only slightly before you, getting to grips with some of the new functionality and how it works exactly. But that's a role that I'm looking very much forward to playing, and I'm working with all of you to make this work for you.
Great, thank you, Scott. Mateus, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our question and answer period. Scott, did you have any closing remarks you would like to add to Jamie's?
No, I was just going to say, just elaborate a little bit more on Jamie's thanks. I too am very excited to be partaking in this project, along with the rest of my entire center here at the University of Queensland. My colleagues, my supervisors, a lot of us at we call ourselves Green Fire Science. We have a team of ecologists and spatial ecologists and spatial planners who really embrace any opportunity to not only do science but apply science and try to actually cause good things to happen in the world. So we're really looking forward to working with countries around the world, and me personally, I'm very excited about it. So thanks for listening to me talk more than I should.
No, thank you so much. Thanks for the demonstration. Thank you for the questions from the audience, and then thank you, Jamie, for the great perspective on how this project fits in with our work. So from here, again, I hope to hear from all of you on the presentation today. We can open up a conversation about how the mapping tool fits in with your 6th National Report data development. Ask all the questions you have about data layers in your countries and how they might fit into helping you answer the questions around each Aichi biodiversity target, how the spatial analyses can be used to help you figure out how the progress is being made to achieve the Convention on Biological Diversity, and how you can fit all of this into the online tool and other structures that are available to pull the national report together. So again, this is just the first conversation of many, we hope, regarding spatial data. We're all here to support you. We love the one-on-one dialogue more than anything. So I think there's a tendency to apologize when you're asking a question or when you're reaching out. And I just want to let everyone know that it's actually our pleasure to work one-on-one with you. And we want to hear from you by Skype. We want to hear from you by email. We want to set up one-on-one conversations. Also would love to dig further into the regional or topical working groups that are necessary to make this project a success, not only in your country, but for biodiversity and the unique problems that you're facing in your country that have parallels in other places across the world. So, this is just the first of many conversations, and we're happy to support you with the 6th National Report and spatial planning. We will make a recording of this available, and we will send it out by the early next week. I also wanted to remind everyone to mark your calendars. Next week, we'll be training you on the data tracking tool that Dr. Jamie Ervin's developed to help everyone track information on the status and achieving the targets and indicators, the strategies and actions, and the SDGs, related MEAs within your NBSAPs. So we hope that you'll join us for that training. I realized today, I think that it's really important that we do the simultaneous translation like we did last week. So we will have Jamie speak in English, and then we'll have a similar translation in Spanish and French, so that everyone gets the information in their native language. So we'll look forward to reconvening next week to learn about how you can track data better and facilitate conversations with your stakeholders around it. Thank you so much to our presenters, and thank you to the attendees for your time. Have a great day. This concludes the presentation.